Yes, let's just wait for 1 minute for other people to join back. Thanks. Yes, I think we can start now.
Okay, so if you have worked or if you have listened to, if you have done any other programming language per se in this developer college, you'll notice that we have something like this. And when this executes, so let's say, you don't need to fully understand this, by the way. So this is to go to the database and fetch all the rows on the table. And then when it fetches the rows on the table, you are calling a method or a function. If you don't really know what this is, you can let me know in the chat so I know how many people don't understand what the method or function is. And then you are doing something with the results that you got from the database. So for example, let's say this is a Facebook application. We are saying select all the users from all the users in Facebook, select all the Facebook users. When we select all the Facebook users, let's say the stuff we want to do is send them a message from Mark Zuckerberg, right? So we are going to pass the list of all the users in Facebook to this method. And this method will go and send all the users messages from Mark Zuckerberg. And then let's say this method is just, okay, print that we are done, that we have said, okay, successful. So how this would run is, to get all the users, this second line would not run until all the users have been gotten from the database. When we get all the users from the database, this line would not run until this method finishes. And then it will now tell us that, okay, we have successfully sent all the messages. But in Node, if you try something like this, while this is still fetching from the database, this guy will fail because it's trying to run. And then it's trying to run while it has not gotten the list of users from the database. Does everyone understand what I've said so far?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anyone that doesn't understand? I can take it again if you don't understand. But anyways, so it will fail because in Node, most of the implementations are done in a way, it's called promises, which I'll explain later. So this is how we write non-blocking. This is the query that is saying fetch all the users from Facebook. But while this is running, this has gone to execute already. While the database hasn't come back already, we can say, okay, print that maybe something else, we are working on it or whatever. And this would only then execute after it has gotten the results of all the users from the database. So we would have practical examples later in the class. So okay, you can go back to full screen, I guess. So what can you do with Node? You can create a web server. That's like applications, a web application basically to receive REST calls. So you can do a TCP server, a static file server. You can just serve up a page, a web chat application, etc. So this is an example of a HTTP server. Okay, let me try to paste this. Oh, sorry. If you copy this and paste it in your index.html, and then we run node index.js, sorry, index.js, not index.html. And then we do localhost 88. Is it 8080 or 8000? 8000, sorry. Okay. What was that? Can we copy what I pasted in the chat and replace what we have in our index.js? And then we run node index.js. When we run that, you would see that we have a server that is now accessible from our web browser. I will explain this, but I need us to run it first to be sure that we are all on the same page. I'll be back in like 1 minute, please. All right, please, has anyone done this? Do we have, can I get confirmation that we have done this?
One sec.
Okay. Any other person, please? Please, let's ensure that we are trying this. This should be a practical class. Or this is a practical class.
Type localhost.
Have you run this? Have you done node index.js and enter?
Yes, sir.
If you notice, it did not close, it didn't end like before. After we had hello world,
Yes.
it will end. So now when you do localhost, you do localhost and this port. What you had there, 8,000 in your browser. And then you see whatever you put there. If you change this to something else, to end, by the way, when this is happening on the terminal, if you want to end it, you can just press Ctrl+C and then it will end. Because if you don't do that, you will not be able to run. If you keep on typing stuff here, nothing will show. So you won't be able to run it again. So like if I change this port, if I change this to 8080 here, and I rerun my project, if I come to the browser here, 8,000 would no longer work. As you can see, it's failing. If I change it now to 8080, we're back to the application. So does everyone have this? Anyone, rather?
Sorry, could you paste the text again, the code again? I can't find it in my chat. I switched laptop.
Okay, I just did that.
Okay, thank you.
Please, after you paste, how do you run it?
Node, the same way we ran the other one, node index.js. Remember, we are still working on the index.js file.
It's displaying hello world.
On your browser, right? Hello?
Hello?
When I run the node index.js, it's displaying hello world
On your browser or on the terminal?
on the terminal.
No. If you run, have you pasted this in your index.js file?
Yes.
Then you need to save it. You might not have saved it. It's using, you need to save this file. It's still using the previous text.
Okay, I've
So
saved it now.
Then you run node index.js. Do you have something like this? Like it doesn't stop, the terminal is waiting.
It's showing
Yes.
allow. Yeah, it is.
So when you run this in your browser, you would see that you have this hello on your browser.
Excuse me, how do we run this?
Node index.js from your terminal.
Okay.
But you have multiple lines. I only have one line, and it
Yes, it's because I was rerunning my.
path. How do you rerun?
If you want to rerun it, you need to end the current
Response.
session by holding Control and pressing C.
Mm-hmm.
So that will end it. And once you end it, you can't run it. If you come to the browser, you see that your application doesn't work anymore because the server is down. Do you understand?
Nothing is happening in mine.
What have you done? Have you pasted this?
Yes, I've done that. I've run it, and it's showing me that waiting thing.
Yes, exactly. So that's what we want to see. This is what you are seeing now, right?
Yes.
So what you have just done is you have started a HTTP server, right? Which I will explain in a bit. So when you go to your browser and you click on localhost 8000, you put the address localhost 8000, you would have, I think I've changed my port. You have hello world showing, or you have hello showing on your browser. Do you understand?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So is anyone still having issues with that?
No, I think it's the same for me. It's more or less listening. Yeah, that is where it's stuck on the terminal.
So it's not stuck. Basically, I'm saying if you go to your browser now, if you go to your web browser,
yeah,
and you type localhost 8000, you will see that you have something. Your web server is now running, and this is what is rendering. Hello, this is the page you are rendering.
yes, and it displays hello.
Okay, so now that I think most of us are on the same page, let me explain this. So Node relies on what we call modules. So this is a module. We are saying give us, and like when you want to use a module, mostly you just do require and the name of the module. So require HTTP, which is telling them that we want to use the HTTP server module, right? You can actually, in the future, if you want, you can actually write your own modules and import them like this, the same way. So we have imported this HTTP module, and then we have assigned it to this variable called HTTP. If you Google the usage, how to use HTTP module in Node, you see that it has a method. It has various methods, but one of them is this create server. This server is basically creating a HTTP server for us, which we are accessing here. And it takes a function as its callback, or sorry, as its first parameter. So this is basically saying response. This is response. This is request and response. Response does write head. Head is like your headers, which is I don't know if you have taken this in other classes, but in web development, you have what we call headers. Headers are what are headers? They are basically like information that lets the client and server to pass. They let the client and server pass information to each other. So now we are saying 200 is basically a response code that says everything is okay. And we are passing a content type of text. And then the body is what we are putting as hello. So, and this final part is saying, I want it to be on this port. So whatever number you put here is what would be used in the browser here. Do we at least have a 50% understanding of what I just said? It doesn't have to be 100.
Yes.
Okay. So we go back to the slides. Okay, like I said, Node heavily relies on modules, which is like this here, which is this require HTTP. You can create your own modules, and they're called packages. So the reason we didn't run this is because HTTP comes with Node. In the future, if we want to use other modules, for instance, let's say we want to use, there's a module called Express. Let's say we want to use that module, we'll run npm install Express. Like we should have run npm install HTTP, but it already comes packaged in Node. So that's why we didn't run it. Okay, these are just some examples of when you can use Node, chat applications, static file server. Like what we just did is just a static app, but you can actually use it to render static pages. So in your HTML class, if we put a bunch of HTML pages here, you can just render them and access them easily. What else? When not to use Node. Node is good, but there are some cases where you can't use it. Like it's advisable not to use it for like a heavy banking application and so on. There are other frameworks that are best suited for those kind of applications. So like I mentioned, we will actually use this Express later on, and maybe we would use NodeMon. I don't know yet. I didn't actually plan that. But basically what NodeMon will do for you is this place where when we run this node.index.js, if we had installed NodeMon, if we make changes here, we would not need to restart this server manually. NodeMon will automatically do it for us. So I think I'll probably add that to our classes. So that's the basic introduction to Node. Wait. So what we are going to do now, I'm thinking we should do a REST application. Does everyone here know what a REST application is? REST service.
No.
Okay. Okay. Let's do a file. Yeah. Let's just have a better understanding of Node and let's work with files. I mentioned that we will do a file reading application earlier on. So let's do that. The module to, remember I said Node works heavily with modules. The module to read and write to files in node is called fs. So we actually do something like fs is equals to, or require fs, but let me show you how we, like I said, you don't need to know all this. So let's say I didn't know this. All I need to do is come to Google and say how to read file in Node, right? Click on this. As you can see, fs, read. So this is the module to read files, and then they have, you can name this anything you want, actually. It doesn't have to be the same name. So this page is basically explaining this file module. So to read a file, you use fs. After you have imported this module, they have a method called read file. And read file takes 3 parameters. The file, as you can see here, the encoding, that gives a text file, mostly is UTF-8, and a callback. A callback is basically when I've gotten the file, or if I fail to get the file, what should I do? So this takes the error and the data. The data would be the content of the file, and the error would be if there are any errors reading the file. Does everyone understand that so far? If I copy this.
We are following.
So if we copy this, I pasted the link there. If we copy this and we go to our index.js and we paste it here, instead of this, if we, let's say we create a file test.txt and we put some random garbage. Let's say put some random garbage in the file, and we come here and we say test.txt. Something is missing here. Okay. So right here, if we say test.txt, and then we run this, as you can see, it read our file. Do you understand?
I think the problem here is that we are trying to understand all these keywords, fs, read file, blah, blah, blah. Maybe most people in this meeting are not quite familiar with JavaScript. That could be an issue because all these console.log, they are all in JavaScript. And maybe you can try to, I don't know how you're going to do it actually, but just try to come down to our level a bit. Yeah, thank you.
Like basically, this require is the keyword to import modules. So there are a list of, there are 1,000 modules, node modules in existence. So you can import it using this. If I put, for example, I type some garbage in here, it's going to tell me that it's going to throw an error because this module does not exist. But the thing is, you can actually write your own module, which is not for now, but you can write your own module and then import it here. So require is just a keyword to import an existing module or a module you have added to your project. When you add modules that are not by default in Node, they will be added here to your package.json file in a tag called dependencies. We would explore that later on. This, what fs here stands for, is a variable. You can change it to anything. You can say file reader. If you change it to file reader, it doesn't have to be fs. You can use anything. Change file reader. And this one has to be fs because that is the module you want to use. But the variable name you assign it can be anything. So once you give it, you can just change it here as well. And if I run this, it will still read. Now, file reader dot, this our variable name does read file. This read file method is part of this. The person that wrote this module had a read file method and said if the method will take 3 parameters. The first one is the file name that you want to read. The second one is the encoding of the file, which for a text file is UTF-8. And the last one is a function. This function will have 2 parameters. An error, for example, if I put a file that does not exist, it will basically tell me that there's an error. So we're saying if there's an error, return console.log. So it will write the error that a file does not exist for us. So no such file in directory. So that's basically what this whole thing means. Is that good, or is anyone lost?
That's better, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Da Silva, I was thinking we should do a REST server example, but I'm not sure now if that's the approach to go. What do you think?
I don't think anybody on the, here knows what REST application is for now. Or, do we know what an API is? Does anybody understand what an API is? Maybe if we do, then we can do that. If not, you need to do little examples.
No, I don't.
Okay,
so
so
yeah.
Try little examples for this first class. Then we are having JavaScript lecture tomorrow morning. So maybe before you come back on Wednesday, they would have had a little idea.
Okay, so let me try and go in line with the other classes that have been going on in Developer College. So as you can see, we have done 2 or 3 examples now. One of the examples was to create a HTTP server. But we can also do basic things like, okay, let's say the concept of functions. Do I remember how to write a function? Function add. Let's say we want to add 2 numbers, right? I was writing it like Java. Okay, so console.log I plus j. If we run it like this, nothing will happen because we have not done anything. We have not said, now that we have declared the function, we should use it like something like this. And then it will work. But let me explain. I just want to check something. 1 second. Okay, it doesn't work like that. Okay. So what I was in other languages, like in Java, you would need to declare that this is the type that you'll be passing in. But in Node, you don't need to. So a function is a function or a method which they are used interchangeably. It's basically a block of reusable code that you can use like in different parts of the application. For example, let's say we want to do addition and we are not going to use a function. So let's say we have a variable. A variable is basically something like var a is equals to 3 and var b is equals to, let's say 4. Let's say we want to add var a and b. We'll do something like this, console.log. No, sorry, before we do console.log, let's say we just do, it's literally a plus b. This is the addition, right? Which is like the mathematics you're used to. So now we want to print this to our console or to our terminal where someone can see. So we'll do console.log. and then this will print A and B. But let's say we also have var C is equals to whatever. Var basically means variable. You can, I think, can you use int? Yes, you can also use like int D. Let's say variable D is equals to 6 or whatever. So if we want to add C and D, we'll also do something like console.log C plus D. But instead of having it manually like this, we want to outsource the summing of variables to a method which will now, or a function which we'll call function sum, and then it takes two parameters, I and j. These things can be anything, number 1 and number 2. And then we can say console.log. So instead of having it 2 times like this, we can just have console.log number 1 here and number 2. And then all we need to do here is do sum A, comma B, sum C, comma D. Then we are good. It will print it the same way. And then this sum can be used anywhere. So if we want to say D, if we want to say D is equals to, if we want to update the value of this and say is equals to A plus B, we don't need to be typing this manually. We'll just do, let's say A plus C, A and C, A comma C, passing the 2 parameters to it. And then we can print out D, console.log D. You can actually do something like this. The value, sorry, if you want to print a string, you put it in quotes. The value of D is undefined. Oh, sorry. I think you have to do this first. Actually, give me a second. I can't remember.
You have 2 D's. Up there, there's a variable called D, which is 6, and then down here, D again is a sum. So
yeah,
it
should.
a conflict.
No, it should still work.
Even if they return different numbers.
Yes. 1 second. I'm not sure if I wait. I haven't done this in a while. Wait. Second, I think the problem is JavaScript timeout. This is bad programming, what I'm doing now. this is supposed to work. I can't remember. Oh, sorry.
You are using that D before you even.
No. In the function, right? I did console.log. I never returned the value of the sum. Do you understand?
Okay.
Like I'm just telling, this function is just supposed to print out the sum, which is actually working. Do you understand? So if I do this, what I was doing is, let's say I return 1 here. D would always be 1. Do we understand? Like a function is supposed to execute stuff, and you can choose to return a value. So here, what I was doing, I was saying console.log. I wasn't returning anything to D. So D was just to log. Do you understand? Do we understand?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
So,
go on.
but at this point, if I say, after you log, after you have printed out the sum here, return, let's return number 1 plus number 2. Okay. Actually, here I wasn't even printing out the sum. So let's say the sum just does, this is now the sum. And I'm saying when I call this method, return, give me the sum. So each time I'm calling, return is basically saying, it's like you borrow somebody, you give somebody money, right? You give somebody, let's say number 1 and number 2, and you're telling the person return, that is give me back number 1 plus number 2. Do you understand? If you don't put return, it's like saying you are giving the person number 1 and number 2, and we are telling the person console.log, that is shout number 1 and number 2. He wouldn't give you back. Do you understand? So we have return number 1 and number 2. So that person is saying, whoever calls my name is sum, and D is calling me. Give D the sum of number 1 and number 2. Do we understand?
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, if you notice, let me clear this space, sorry. If you notice, we did, let me just explain. If you notice, after we said sum is number 1 plus number 2, we called sum here, sum A, we called sum 2 times here, and then we called it here again. But we only said print out this. So you might ask, why are we not printing out anything here? At this point, we said sum A and sum B, we got the value, but we didn't do anything with it. The person has given us back, but we did not say, okay, it now belongs to somebody here. Do we understand? And then we never said print out anything, because in this our code, this is the only place that is printing out a response. So if, for example, I remove this line, we would not see anything here. And if I put the line back, and in this place I say console.log, I say don't return the value, just just write it to the screen and say number 1 plus number 2. If you remember, in this place, we're also expecting this guy to return it, but we are not returning anything, right? We're only consoling.log. So what will happen is it will console.log the sum and tell us that this guy is undefined. It means that this guy there's no value for that guy. So as you can see, it's console.logging everything, console.log this, console.log this, and console.log